Now that the holidays are behind us, our team at Passion Life is starting to focus more and more on the immediate year that's ahead of us and thinking with our board of directors and our staff here and around the world about our strategic plans for this year and how they roll into the next several years together. As part of that process, we like to think through where abortion is most concentrated in the world, and I want to give you a quick update on just the whole global picture of abortion worldwide and how it is impacting the decisions that we're making at Passion Life and where we want to give our attention, where we want to direct your donations, where we want to appeal for your intercessory prayers, and where we plan to travel this year and in the coming years. So what is the global picture of abortion? Well, first of all, there's a sources question. There are several places that you can go to try to find statistics on worldwide abortion, but they're all challenging to use because we don't really have a regulated universal system for collecting the data correctly. So you have to look at several places. The place that I have come to trust the most and to use over the last 8 or 9 years is a resource called Abortion Worldwide Report, written by Robert Johnston. And he also updates the data that he collects on a website called johnston'sarchives.net. And he has been very forthright in helping us recognize the weaknesses of some of the data. Some of the data is very old. Some of the data is more of is not government official data. But anyway, he's the guy that we have relied upon to try to give us the best data that we can. And if we don't want to trust the numbers too completely, at least it gives us the trend lines that ought to focus our attention if our mission is to go to the places where abortion is most concentrated and bring the gospel of life to that place. That's kind of our calling card as a mission and what we're doing together. So those are the sources. Now, if you take a look at the data and you map it out, the big picture data is that abortion is especially concentrated in 3 parts of the world. The first 2 are not surprising, but the third one always is a surprise to most people. Number 1 is Asia. So think of China, India, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and so on and so forth. That part of the world has exceedingly high rates of abortion. Number 2 is Eastern Europe. Think of the former USSR countries: Russia, Romania, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and so on and so forth. Very, very high rates of abortion. The third one is the Caribbean. That's the one that surprises most people because I think most of us still are familiar with the predominantly Catholic influence in places like Cuba and on the other islands. And yet those islands are have the highest rates of abortion in the world today. Cuba has been number 1 since we started collecting the data about 8 years ago. They're no longer number 1, I am glad to report. So that's kind of the sources and the big picture. Now, if you look at the specific list of countries, and we've taken all the countries of the world, and we've removed the countries that have less than 10 million people in them. So, for example, Greenland has a very high abortion rate, but from a missionary standpoint, from being strategic with the use of your charity, we have higher priorities than Greenland. And there are other Caribbean islands the same way, very high abortion rates, and maybe we need to get to them at some point. But we're trying to get to countries that have a population of at least 10 million people in them. And when you look at that list of countries, Cuba has been number 1 for a while, followed by China and Russia, or Russia and China, depending on what year you look at the data. Kazakhstan has a very high abortion rate, which is why we've taken 3 or 4 trips to Kazakhstan. Vietnam has long been in the top list of 15 countries, though the recent data says that they are below that rate now. So some good things are happening in Vietnam. So it's Cuba, China, Russia, Sweden, Kazakhstan, Vietnam, so on and so forth. Now that data is changing, and our newest map or list of countries would suggest that India has now taken over the top spot in terms of the rates of abortion, followed again by China, Azerbaijan, which was not at all on the list when we started collecting this information. They are now in the number 3 spot, and Cuba has dropped to number 4. So the good news is that we're seeing tremendous impact for the gospel of life in a country like Cuba. And we're all in on Cuba because they used to be number 1. And we're all in on some of these Asian countries as well. But Azerbaijan raises a particularly interesting question about whether we need to be thinking and praying about doing some work in that country. Russia is always a challenge for us. I've been to Russia. I've been to several countries in the U.S., in the former USSR, and most recently been to Romania, and we're starting to see some things really take off in Romania. But it's been hard to find a place, an entry point into Russia and a couple of other countries in that area, in part because of the state of the church in those countries is very, very weak. So anyway, this is sort of the data that lies behind some of our strategies that then inform our priorities in where we go and how we spend your invested charity into this great work. And I wanted to give you that update for 2025. We really see that we ought to be really starting to rethink how we can double, triple, quadruple our impact in India now that India is becoming the number 1 country in the world in terms of the rate of abortion. That's quite a challenge for us, and we want to maintain the work that we're doing in Cuba and other places, but we need to expand our efforts in a place like India in the coming year. And we need to start thinking about places that we have never gone to before, but are rising on this list of countries with the highest rates of abortion. If we're going to be true to our mission of going to the hardest and the neediest places, I think that's where you are needed most. It's where I think my time and effort and thoughts at this point in my life needs to be focused. Go to the neediest places. Let us be missionaries to the unborn and to those in crisis. Let's see if we can't equip the church through our 4 questions training in these neediest places as our top priority, and see what God will do in both saving the innocent and bringing the good news to the guilty. So that's kind of a quick summary, a global picture. I invite your prayers, your ongoing support, your feedback, your thoughts, your questions. Feel free to contact us. We want to feel connected to all of those who are willing to join us in this massive missionary effort to bring the gospel of life to the neediest places on earth. Thank you very much.